It's day number 29 at the Idaho Statehouse as more bills are working their way around the building, including one that barely left the launch pad to move forward, and another that made absentee ballots a bigger ask in Idaho. There's a big old blue dot in downtown Boise with several blue dudes hanging around it. It's new art for the City of Trees with a story that may not match how you see it until now. Orville Jackson is a well-known name in one of Ada County's oldest cities. It's on several buildings, including the iconic Orville Jackson drugstore. Today, that old soda fountain stop is getting a new future, and that name ain't going anywhere. Governor Little's idea to help Idaho's high school graduates go to college may have been a bit of a surprise in the announcement during his State of the State address to begin the legislative session, but what hasn't exactly been a surprise, the reaction from his own party and the lukewarm support that bill has received, as evidenced by today's vote on the House floor. House Bill 24 to expand the Idaho Launch Program and to give $8,500 grants to graduates to, quote, go on, barely passed 36 to 34, clocking in at more than 2 hours. It's the longest floor debate of the session so far. The plan is to create a $102 million program by pooling the funds of 3 other programs, 2 of which will be defunct if this passes. Those against the bill asked whether it was necessary, given Idaho's low unemployment rate, or if it was too limiting, granting preference to students chasing in-demand careers. And those jobs change with the times, obviously. But the overarching argument against it seems to be an overreach of government.
Where does it stop? What's next? You know, I mean, my gosh, we could put everybody through college and, you know, life would be beautiful, but that's just not how it works. You know, this is something that we just need to not do in Idaho. This is something Oregon or Washington would do. It's certainly not Idaho.
This is centralized planning. This is government deciding what we want the kids to do and how we want them to train. It reminds me of China. That's what they do in communist countries. They basically line out what your future is going to look like.
It's a false perception that just because we train them in Idaho, they're going to stay in Idaho. People like Idaho. People come back to Idaho. It's not because that's where they're trained. It's because Idaho is Idaho. And let's keep Idaho, Idaho, and not make Idaho a government-funded state where we provide everything with the government.
No, it's not Oregon, it's not Washington, it's not even China. And yes, it is Idaho, as mentioned 9 times there, but no, it's not China, as mentioned by Representative Heather Scott. This would be a volunteer program, by the way, so it's not really forcing anybody into a certain career. Those in favor seem to come from those who know what thousands of high school kids are dealing with. Current and former educators who have heard the reasons why those kids' education stopped at the 12th grade, especially after speaking with some of those former students.
And it's amazing how many times I will remember a conversation where they have fulfilled the dream that they had in high school. And when they don't, when there's something that took them off course, it's primarily financially driven.
Then we have an opportunity to step up and say we actually do care about Idaho kids having Idaho jobs, to pay Idaho taxes, to give back to that next generation, to promote the general welfare and well-being of this state. And I don't mean welfare handout, welfare, that we all can have a decent paying job, raise our families, and not have to be part of that over 52% that we heard about that say they have to worry about paying their bills all the time or most of the time. We can do better.
House Bill 24, the expanded Idaho Launch Program, now heads over to the Senate. Over in the House State Affairs Committee, Republican Representative Joe Alfieri made some noise with House Bill 75 today. He aims to restrict absentee ballots to only for active military personnel, people in the hospital or those who have to work or be away at college, and those serving on a religious mission trip. He says it closes the door on potential voter fraud. In the same breath, he also added no widespread absentee voter fraud has ever been documented in Idaho. He says this is a step to streamline the election process and makes life easier for county clerks on Election Day. So we asked a county clerk, the Ada County clerk, by the way, who is Trent Triple, and he says, well, it's actually the exact opposite.
It's a popular way to vote for many people. I would like to see it remain that way. If not a lot of people are using absentees, then they're showing up on Election Day, and that means longer lines. And I think we have a really good process in place. And so I'd hate to see that change and add workload to our clerks and frustration to the voters.
House Bill 75 is still in committee. Then on to Senate Bill number 1039, which proposed rental fees have to be written in the lease agreement or other written agreement that fees will be reasonable. This is going to add new language to Idaho's landlord-tenant code. It's proposed by Senator Ali Rabi, who is in the executive director of Jesse Tree, who also helps prevent eviction and homelessness in the Treasure Valley. This bill is in the Senate Judiciary and Rules Committee, and we are going to, as always, keep a lookout for it and keep you up to date on what is happening in the legislature. What do you say to people who think that's weird?
I like it. I mean, I don't mind that they think it's weird, or if they don't like it, it's part of the environment now.
And it's only been part of the environment in place for about 2 months. And perhaps you've noticed it. Driving west on Front Street, walking north on 5th, there's an interesting new art piece attached to a Boise parking garage that you just saw just there. It's getting some interesting looks, too, and interpretations. But if you haven't seen it, well, let us introduce you to the pale blue dot in downtown Boise. It's the most recent.
It's really awesome.
And possibly the most unparalleled piece of public art in Boise.
It's something very attractive for sure.
On the northwest corner of 5th and Front,
I think it's grand. I think it's really beautiful.
there's a sculpture that catches your attention and lets your imagination
I'm not sure.
run wild.
People scaling things for what they love.
The artist took it like a sun clock and went creative with it.
The artist,
My name is John Yarnell, and I am the lead artist and creative director for Studio Capacitor.
certainly went creative with it.
To me, it's about connection. It's called Pale Blue Dot.
John's idea was inspired by Carl Sagan and the view of Earth from the Voyager space probe.
Visualizing it from a distance, seeing how insignificant we are as human beings on this planet, and that resonated with me deeply when I was thinking about this piece, this need for connection between human beings.
Evidenced by a couple of life-sized figures reaching for each other.
Like we're living in this digital age where we got our heads buried in our phones, or we're watching Netflix until we pass out on the couch. Is that a product of the political environment, the way we're treating the planet, or is it this new technology that we all love and adopted, and then created this place where we just don't communicate enough to realize how connected we are together? Or why we need to remember that we have more in common than we do, that divides us basically.
A disconnect that's become more distinct as John nears his 5th decade on this planet.
Over the last, it seems like 7 or 8 years, we've been more divided as a society than I can ever remember.
You don't really get that feeling from it at all. You understand, the more words it takes to explain something, the more balderdash it is.
Well, no matter how you see it,
A graduate art school project run amok.
there's more than one way to see it, which is fitting for this faceted art form.
It was huge.
It took more than 2 years for John and his staff to put it together, and just 2 days for them to place the piece on the side of the parking garage.
The logistics that we had to get over just to take the piece that was now fabricated, move it to that location, and then install it on a wall that's 90 feet tall in the middle of winter.
But it's what they used that makes it unique.
Yeah, so this is a material called alucobond.
Something that has never been shaped into a sculpture before, John says.
And reflects back all this iridescent light at you. So it goes from that pale blue dot to like this deep, deep blue purple color that kind of like the Earth does from different angles.
Whether that's waiting at the light or walking across the street. But the best view may be from directly below.
And if you walk up to that wall and look straight up at it, you get the most unique experience. It changes gravity basically for you because it's designed in a way so when you look up at it, it feels like that's the plane of the Earth at that point. You just see blue sky behind you. You feel like you're on some desert plain and there's an oasis in the middle of it, and these people are migrating towards it for some reason.
Each figure inches closer to the watering hole, drawn by the shared human need for connection and safety.
It's also about the impact we place on that pool, the repercussions of ripples.
And each one of those kind of overlap each other from other people's ripples that are going across, and they all have consequences, and that's what those ripples in the water represent to me.
Pale Blue Dot explores an idealistic world in which humanity comes together and agrees to set aside personal differences to share Earth's precious resources.
And we just need to remember that that is something that binds us together and stop focusing on the small things that divide us is what this is about.
It's a lot more than just blue dudes on a wall.
It's a lot more than blue dudes on a wall, yeah.
So, yay Boise.
Now, John says there's another common denominator with the pale blue dot sculpture. He went with blue for the life-size figures because, well, all of us are about 60% water. John says it's not just from where you view the piece, but also what time of day, depending on the shadows. All that plays a part, and it can change the experience. So check it out. And so does the snow that collects on it in the wintertime, or the rain that drips off while either it's melting or just the rain that just falls through, or falls, I should say, on the sculpture. So next time you're there, you see it, just stand directly below it and see if you can get that same vision that he's talking about. His house and his business are both icons in the city of Eagle. Orville Jackson's name isn't attached to a drugstore anymore, but his legacy will continue with the property. The new owners have new plans for the old building. Oh, it's that time. Time to send us your questions, your comments, and your concerns. Just keep them quick, clean, and clever. Text them to the number on your screen, 208-321-5614. Also, don't forget to add your name and the hashtag #the208. Oh, and stick around, because we could share yours at the end of the show. Orville Jackson has his name all over the city of Eagle, almost quite literally. The Idaho native was well known in and around the city. And a drive down State Street and you'll still see what used to be his drugstore. You know, a place where you can always get it of, and he's never just out, that same Orville Jackson. A few blocks away stands what used to be his Tudor-style home. Jackson's only daughter grew up in that house, then moved back in years later. We caught up with her when she was trying to sell it, and she wanted the historic site to be preserved for future generations in today's 208 Redial. The city of Eagle didn't officially become a city until 1971, but it had been a thriving community for decades before, built up with its own bank, hotel, and downtown drugstore. Widely known as the Orville Jackson Drugstore for more than 50 years.
Well, when I grew up, they always said Orville Jackson put Eagle on the map. That's what I always heard.
His daughter, Sherry Sharp, still lives in the family home about a block away on Eagle Road.
This house is 5 years older than me. The house was built in 1931, so it's 86 years old.
It was right in the middle of the Great Depression. Money was tight, but the Jacksons had put enough aside for a new home.
My dad said my mother counted that money so much he was afraid she'd rub the numbers off it.
They'd wanted something special. So Sherry says they called on John Turtlette and Charles Hummel, the same Treasure Valley architects that designed Idaho Statehouse, to put together this Tudor-style home, a vision of Orville's wife, Floy.
So I think maybe in her mind she had like her dream house.
Back then, workers were paid $1 a day to complete the 3,100 square foot home in the middle of 2.5 acres. Total cost was about $10,000. Today, the Jackson home is for sale for about $1.7 million. It still has the original leaded windows, the original woodwork and oak beams inside, and the memories of their only daughter, who wants to see it saved for future generations.
I want to save it because because it meant so much to them.
Sherry says she's getting too old to care for the home herself, but hopes her parents' contribution to this community would help keep the property preserved for something other than commercial progress.
That's why I've persevered and stayed here this long, hoping that I could find someone that would share my dream and purchase this property and save this home.
Well, she did a couple of those things. Sherry sold the house eventually to the city of Eagle in September of 2021, so it took a few years. They paid $1 million for it. Eagle Mayor Jason Pierce said he wanted to preserve the building, the home, and make it into an event center. The terms of the sale allowed Sherry to stay there for a while, at least for a year, while she found a new place to live. That agreement ended on September 10th of last year, 2022, but with apparently no word from Sharp, according to the city. So they tried to evict her last October. However, she then asked for more time, wanting to stay until the end of January this year, which was about a week ago. And we're still trying to find out if that happened or if Sherry is still there. But what about the other Orville Jackson building, the drugstore, the one you saw at the very beginning of that story? Well, it got purchased as well, but let's give a little history first. Orville Jackson returned from France at the end of World War I and decided to go to pharmacy college, what is now known as Drake University in Iowa. In 1921, he passed his exam in Idaho and became a pharmacist, managing the drugstore in Star. Then on his birthday, August 16th, 1922, Jackson bought the Eagle Pharmacy from L.B. Harris. It became a popular stop in the 20s because, well, they had a pretty nice soda fountain. Diverse items always available for Treasure Valley customers as well. Remember, you can always get it of Orville Jackson. After 52 years of owning the drugstore, Jackson sold it to Wayne and Jane Crosby in 1974. The Crosbys held on to the store until they retired in 2006. The newest owner is Eagle resident Mark Fitzpatrick. He is now turning this popular soda stop into a saloon, all while preserving the history.
This is an iconic building for Eagle as far as just recognizable in the area because it's been here since basically 1906, so a lot of history. We don't want to do anything here that's going to change the way things look, and we want to honor the history. We want this place to be something that supports the community, supports local businesses.
He said they're going to have live music, historic names and classes called Salooniversity, apparently, where you can grab a beer and learn something new. Hopefully more than just from the guy down the seat, or 2 seats down, I should say. And phase 2, making the bar into a restaurant featuring local ranchers and farmers. So they have big plans. Fitzpatrick says he hopes all of this happens and comes together this summer. So yeah, times do change. And there's a couple of generations who have no idea what those of us from older, better generations had to deal with. Reminds me of that scene in Fast Times, Richmond High, when Mr. Hand handed out his class schedule and the entire class just couldn't help but sniff the mimeograph. Remember those? Several generations who have no idea how strong that olfactory memory is. Like this picture posted on a Facebook page from something they found on, I want to believe, Reddit a few years ago. Well, it just makes it around again. And it's about something they found, quote, in the bathroom of a union hall in Lewiston, Idaho. Some kind of metal faucet-looking device, followed by the acronym WITT. I don't know what WITT is, but I do know what that device is, and it's not a faucet. Let's just say it's another place for butts in the bathroom, which isn't a toilet seat. Cigarette butts. You put them in the bowl. When it gets full, you push that little lever there. It'll flush them into the bowl underneath. Who knows the last time that thing was used, right? But hopefully not for, well, you know, ever, whatever. Which reminded us of other things we don't really see anymore, if at all. How about ashtrays in restaurants? Or even people smoking outside of restaurants very much. Payphones, phone books, nope, don't exist. Cars without seatbelts, tough to find those. Metal slides in the playgrounds. How about the VCR, the iPod, or the Palm Pilot? All of them obsolete these days. And of course, yes, the McDLT, which never should have happened in the first place. So if anyone knows what the acronym WITT stands for, please let us know. We'll accept wrong answers only. All right, last week, about 4 days ago, Groundhog Puxatawny Phil, he spoke. Well, he didn't speak, he just kind of went out and saw a shadow, which means 6 more weeks of winter. So hold off your dreams of floating the Boise River anytime soon, or water skiing in McCall, or digging your feet into the sand at Redfish Lake. Or don't, because, well, at least one local bar laid down around 32,000 pounds of sand to bring the beach to Boise.
Well, as you know, Boise is, they have a lot of inversions. It's kind of cool to feel like you're controlling the elements, so it's a nice little beach in Idaho. So we're starting beach week, setting up for Saturday to Saturday. We fill the bar with sand, 32,000 pounds of sand or so. Yeah, we fill it up 4 to 6 inches, and then we just have events every night. We've done it 4 years, yeah. So first year, we had a conveyor that went through the door, and we shoveled it onto that, conveyed it in, and then shoveled it all throughout the bar. Now, we've upgraded, so we get to go in and out a lot quicker. It is definitely a bit of work. I think it's worth the effort, so I think people really enjoy it in town. It kind of brings up the morale in winter.
And no shoes required. If you've ever been to the Handlebar, you know that there was something there in its place. So they had to tear down a pump track in the middle of the bar to make room for all that sand. And they used their handy meter there to throw that dirt down, as you see. And this is kind of a time-lapse version of what they did. That was inside. I've never been there. They had a dirt track inside the bar? That's amazing. All right, well, time for the beach now. The beach opened up Saturday for cold Idahoans to dip their toes. Handlebar Boise's beach opened through this Saturday, so take advantage of it. Grab your favorite Hawaiian shirt, enjoy an oasis right in your own backyard. All right, let's get to your comments on this Monday to open up the week of what's happening at the Statehouse today. I appreciate hearing a couple reasonable Idaho representatives understanding that some Idaho teens need assistance with higher education and are not looking for a handout. Not all assistance is evidence of government overreach. At times, assistance is an investment, and in this instance, our greatest assets, our children, hoping the Senate passes the bill for the sake of the future generations, says Shannon. Representative Heather Scott obviously is unable to read if she thinks Governor Little's bill forces kids to study something they don't want, just like China. Also, we just don't get the pale blue dot, says Laura. That's okay. Just go check it out once in a while. See if you understand. Now knowing what it means, see if it makes a little bit more sense when you get there. Idaho legislators, leave our voting rights alone. There are no problems. Idaho's setup is working beautifully. No fraud detected. Better for folks to do nothing at all than something destructive. Idaho citizens hope you will drop this unnecessary voter suppression legislation, says Jan in Boise. Why is the Idaho legislature trying to create laws that add no value, especially when there's no proof the law is needed? GOP waste. A lot of folks like me migrate and don't want to have to be in Idaho on Election Day. Snowbirds in November. True. I and many people I know use absentee ballots for this reason. This bill would penalize those of us who travel in retirement, says Nancy in McCall. A lot of people asking about, okay, so if I'm disabled, the absentee ballot's the only way I have to vote. It's hard for me to get to the polls. They should not mess with them, and I leave it alone. There is a section there, though, that says if you're disabled, well, this law doesn't apply to you. But I don't know if that means you have to apply and say, I'm disabled. This is how this works. See you tomorrow.